policy headquartered in DC. So thank you, Judy, for joining us today. And the Adult Career Pathways Cohort, as many of you are very aware, began this summer with a webinar and then some face-to-face work in conjunction with the Summer Institute. And here we are already well into our coaching calls and our webinar, and this work will continue through next May of 2018. It's a new initiative for us, and we're so glad that Liz Andress is leading this work, and I will turn things over to her now.
Great to have you. Really, today, we've got lots going on, and we've decided to take an approach of sort of seeds of various perspectives and strategies from lots of people. I encourage you to take notes and really be listening for what can apply to your context. I would say the most challenging aspect of this professional development is that every context, particularly in terms of what's happening with workforce partners and how all of that is structured, is so different for each one of you. And so it's just going to be important, rather than saying, oh, that doesn't fit my context, to really be open and curious and pick up on things, strategies that could be useful in some way, modified, that fits for you. And then we are very clear that the questions that you raised as we asked you for input to this webinar through Schoology, there's just lots more than can be addressed in 90 minutes. We've got some tools that are already in Schoology. We may be gathering some more today and after the webinar. We will probably continue some discussion from today in Schoology. So we'll get lots out of today and see a trajectory beyond today of continued critical conversation around ABE and workforce partnering. We'll put together a set of framing questions. Judy Mortrud will give us the big picture. Again, multiple perspectives from a variety of contexts. And I'll ask each person as you speak just to introduce yourself. We also have names and titles and organizations on the slides as we go. And somebody was asking about the availability of the PowerPoint, and it is in the webinar and available upon completion. And everybody in the cohort, it also is posted in Schoology. And the complete recording will also be posted to Schoology once that's available. Again, brief input from each person, variety of strategies that you can use, and take notes. And again, I think we pretty much said this already. Just type your questions and comments into the chat box. And also, a roster of today's speakers is in GoToMeeting and in Schoology. Some of you may want to follow up individually with participants in our presenters in today's webinar, and that's a good way to do that. So our framing questions for today are: why partner with Workforce and with whom? How do we establish, sustain, and strengthen partnerships? What are effective strategies for joint recruitment of adult career pathway participants to meet enrollment goals? And really all of those end up being quite intertwined, but we've organized our day around those critical questions. And again, a real bias or a view from the field, looking at practical approaches to the work that can equip you to move your goals forward. Again, aware that we have quite a few guests with us today from Workforce, I just wanted to recap for everyone, and also it's been a while since we've been together as a cohort, sort of where we are and where we're going. We've got 23 ABE program managers participating in the cohort. All of you have set goals and action plans for workforce efforts. The Schoology discussion that we had informed this webinar, and we'll continue to use Schoology as a way to share out tools for this work. We also have found that the check-in calls that we've been doing as part of the cohort approach has been really a valuable exchange of ideas, and I thank you all for really thoughtful participation, support of each other in this challenging work. And again, that wide range of contexts. Hope that you hear today some things that will be relevant for your setting. One other way to sort of frame what we're hearing from the field as we've looked at your SMART goals and had conversations by phone is sort of thinking on a continuum about adult basic education and workforce relationships for adult career pathway programming. Really at the bottom is when we work in silos. We really aren't in relationship. We don't have a connection between adult basic education and the related workforce folks in the workforce center, the workforce system, and we're really saying that can't be business as usual anymore, though it's still somewhat common. Eventually, we connect with each other to the extent that we send participants to each other, but really still not communicating or coordinating among staff. So somebody shows up in Workforce Center, they might send them to ABE and the other way around. And most of us are finding that that doesn't work very well if there's no coordination of those cross referrals. To move further on and start to communicate with one another, we can work on joint two-way referral systems, and we'll talk about that some today. That's an important step. And then quite a few of you have coordinating relationships where you're planning and implementing a particular adult career pathway, usually grant funded, focus on that specific program. Each party takes roles. It may include funds. And then ultimately, the goal, if you look way back at that career pathway checklist that we started with in the cohort back in August, the goal truly is collaboration. The common mission is clear. Vision, planning, and joint grant seeking is the modus operandi, and there's a structure set to support that ongoing work. So keep this in mind. I hope this is helpful. Again, this has sort of come up in the calls, and this has helped me sort of frame what are the differences and what's happening in the various contexts. And we'll talk about really how folks have moved, why and how people have moved up this, this ladder of relationship. We're really privileged to have Judy Mortrud here, and I will pass it to you, Judy. We're just going to unmute you, just one second. Okay, Judy.
Thanks, Liz. Hello, everybody. Nice to be on with you. I guess I'll build from Liz's last slide where the top level you're trying to reach is collaboration, and I'm going to say there's one more level to that, which I know some of you have achieved in Minnesota, and that is really truly working in partnership between your adult ed and your workforce development system. And by partnership, I mean you are bringing resources to the table, and you are responsible for outcomes, the outcomes of your partnership work together. So to get to that point, you really need to be shooting at the same target, and that's where I'll start here, is just talking about WIOA performance. You know, in my experience in Minnesota, both at Hub Center and with Minnesota Fast Track, the greatest challenge of working with WIOA Title I workforce development was basically our different performance outcomes. Adult education, all during WIA, has basically lived or died on the performance measure that was formerly known in the law as EFL, right? Education Functioning Level. And as you know well, this is an interim progress measure. It's a successful outcome that we could collect while we were continuing to serve an individual over a long period of time. And the WIOA Title I adult and dislocated worker systems did not have interim progress measures under WIA. They operated under a system where they only had exit-based performance measures, basically placed in employment, retained in employment. And they could only collect a successful outcome once an individual left their program. So it really, it was really that tension that led to workforce development partners. Low-level person was really our high-level person in adult education, right? We were having trouble seeing how we could work together when they needed to get people in and out in a year, and we knew we were going to need to work with people longer and longer. So under WIOA, all the core programs now have the same performance measures with a few tweaks. And we don't have job placement and job retention, but we have something like it. We have employed second quarter, fourth quarter after exit. Most adult ed students are working, so that should be fairly easy for us. We have meeting earnings, we have post-secondary credential attainment, and we have measurable skill gain and employer satisfaction. So on the question of focus and who to work with, measurable skill gain is a performance measure that Title I adult, youth, dislocated worker really could use some of our help understanding how to use that performance measure, how to let the workforce development system work with people who will not enter and exit in one program year with a successful exit outcome, really recognizing people who need foundational skill building, workforce preparation, and workforce training. So essentially they need IET. Some other beyond performance, some other alignment opportunities are some new definitions in WIOA. We have a long list, 13 characteristics that describe individuals with barriers to employment. Those include things like low-income individuals, older individuals, ex-offenders. It also includes individuals who are English language learners, individuals who have low levels of literacy, and individuals facing substantial cultural barriers. So that sounds a lot like our shared population. Again, the measurable skill gain, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Funding, you know this for Title II, that we have integrated EL Civics allocation now wrapped into WIOA, and that is an allocation that needs to at least point toward an integrated education and training program. We also have our core partners in WIOA have new funding focuses. Title I youth, 75% needs to be on out-of-school youth, many of whom find their way into adult education programs. For Title I adult and dislocated worker, there are opportunities now to spend money on cohort training, the kind of training that can support career pathway cohorts, or on-the-job training, incumbent worker training. And Title IV has a new emphasis on serving students who are transitioning out. I think we used to call these students transition plus students in St. Paul. People who are transitioning out of secondary had an IEP, and there's a great emphasis now on the services to help people transition to post-secondary, which is another place where I think there's a lot of opportunity for interaction with adult ed. And finally, priority of service. Priority of service is a mandated in the Title I adult part of WIOA, a mandate to serve, to prioritize service to public benefit recipients, basic skill deficient individuals, and low-income individuals, which again feels like a very shared population. Next slide. So I want to focus a little bit on, you can just kind of click through this slide and get them all up here, on the measurable skill gain. Again, we always got these 6 performance measures. They're now shared between you and your Title I partner, your adult and dislocated worker partner have a complete overlap. Your Title III partner, your Wagner-Pizer partner, the state employee who's in a workforce center or resource room, doesn't have all of these, but most of them doesn't have this one. But measurable skill gain, again, what we used to call, in the law, used to be called educational functioning level, and it's still called that in our national reporting system. But they intentionally didn't put that into the federal law because they wanted a way to think about measuring interim progress, measuring skill gains over time with individuals in a multiple measures kind of way, right? So we have educational function level gain. If you go straight down, EFL is still there as pre-test, post-test, which is how most of us think about it. But it's also completion of Carnegie units. So if you had a high school credit recovery program, and it's also transition into post-secondary education. So that's 3 ways to do educational function level gain. But beyond that, there are other ways to do measurable skill gain. There is the just straight up achievement of a secondary diploma equivalent or equivalent, secondary or post-secondary transcript, so accumulating credits, college credits, secondary credits. There's something called progress toward milestones, which is really kind of fits in the space of a pre-apprenticeship, apprenticeship. You and an employer deciding, putting a program together and saying, these are the milestones, this is how we're going to gauge success. And if we can document progress toward that success, you know, we can show that's a measurable skill gain. And then this passing technical or occupational knowledge-based exam, which if you work with Perkins partners, feels very much like the technical skill attainment measure in Perkins. It's, you know, it could be passing a CDL exam, CERSIT exam, any kind of third-party knowledge-based exam. So next slide. Both of these slides come from the Texas Workforce Commission, which runs their Title II program in Texas. And their State Director, Anson Green, has been really promoting the use of all measurable skill gains for all of his adult ed programs. Even though right now the national reporting system is not figured out necessarily how to collect all of these measures, they are still part of WIOA quarterly or annual reporting. Next slide. But to show you where this kind of work will get lifted up from Minnesota to the federal level, I want to show you two tables from the national reporting system. This one is essentially just the number of participants in your programs. And I think the interesting part here is that you see integrated education and training program listed under all 4 of the program types. So even though it's only required in the integrated EL Civics education portion of the 243 money in WIOA, it is an activity that can happen across the spectrum of adult education service, and we are actually going to be able to see a picture of this nationally, who's doing it and where and with which populations, which will be really interesting. And then the next table is a table that is still just a proposed table for the national reporting system, so it hasn't come out yet, but word is that next year we may see this table for our adult ed reporting. And the interesting part here is that it really is, if you look at the first column, it is expanding into some of those other measurable skill gain types. Technical occupational skills is showing up in this reporting system, reporting table. So again, I think that measurable skill gain conversation is really a place of opening between you and your workforce development partners. Many of the workforce development people I talk to across the country, Title I people, just haven't had guidance from their state yet, hadn't really thought about what it would mean to use measurable skill gain, and when I have this conversation with them, they get very excited about ways of showing progress with individuals without having to exit them from their programs. So essentially, I'm just promoting this idea that there's a lot of room now under WIOA for this win-win, but you know, it takes a lot of work to get people kind of out of their ruts and to help them see new opportunities within their federal law. So essentially, these are some of the talking points I think that you could bring to a workforce development conversation, either at a workforce board or with your Title I partners, that we have these mandates. Both of our systems have these mandates to serve these individuals with barriers to employment, that we are shooting at the same target now, that ABE has expertise in this measurable skill gain, that we know how to move people forward over time, and that by using more of these skill gain types, we're going to be able to show the power of our system beyond just helping people do better on a standardized assessment. So, thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Judy. Not seeing any questions in the chat box, we are going to move forward. Again, please be sure as you listen, we will be monitoring the chat box, and as we come to some breaking points, we will address 1 or 2 questions that seem to be common. But for now, we're going to move on. Now we have ABE and workforce colleagues sharing their perspectives, and the framing questions for this next section are: why do various Minnesota workforce partners choose to collaborate with ABE in design and delivery of adult career pathway programs? And from your perspective, what is your win-win? Why do ABE programs collaborate with workforce partners? What is your win-win take on all of this? And then ultimately, how our adult career pathway participants serve better through our collaboration. We're very happy today to have Paula Reed here, invited through Patty Fleege. Patty was not able to join us, but we have some input from her. Paula, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. So I just wanted to oh, there's really bad feedback. Let me try something else. Can you hear me okay? Nope, that didn't work. Okay. So anyways,
you're good.
I guess what I would say is that it just makes sense to partner with ABE, and we've had a really strong relationship with Patty and her team, not only in having them present within our workforce center a couple of different days per week, but also working in partnership on pretty much any grant opportunity that comes our way. I think that when a grant comes out, we get together with our partners, which includes ABE, to talk about what the best way to deliver those services, recognizing that kind of the way we view what ABE provides in relation to our Pathways to Prosperity project is that really preparing the students to be successful in the classroom training that is provided, so that they have the best chance of success, and we all have the best chance of success with the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And so some of the benefits that we found are just working together on recruitment. When you have multiple organizations helping with recruitment, each individual staff member has to work with fewer people. We can give more attention to them. If one agency is recruiting more than another agency, you have the ability to shift numbers, ultimately making sure that we get the majority of people into the program as possible. So we do have those points that were mentioned on the prior screen, you know, a shared mission, shared vision. It's collaborative planning. We go after grants together, and there's a structure for how we work together. I think that over time we have developed a clarification of roles, and that there's a clear understanding of the benefits each partner brings to the table. On the screen there, it talks about partnerships and collaboration being time-consuming, and they definitely are more time-consuming than doing it on our own, but both Patty and I would agree that it's well worth the effort and time that it takes to work together to do something right. We've learned a lot by trial and error. Some of the things we've tried haven't worked as effectively as others, and that's okay. You just do it a little differently the next time. We work hard to engage industry, and I think that's important for the relationship with ABE as well, so they have what they need to be able to provide the contextualization and integrated instruction. And ultimately, we're able to maximize the resources, reduce silos and duplication, and just have a more systematic way of doing things when we work towards a common goal.
Thank you. And Patty would have spoken to this, but just very interesting to see what the ABE involvement is in that Duluth collaboration around the local workforce development board, the committees. She's on a career pathway committee, specifically around their healthcare pathway. Patty also serves on the Youth Education Experiential Learning Committee, subcommittee. She's on that executive committee of the local workforce development board. They have this co-location at the Workforce Center, and WorkForce is also coming to ABE. So lots of collaboration in that context. Thank you so much, Paula.
You're welcome.
We also wanted to hear from the experience that Penny and Beth have shared in Albert Lee. Beth and Penny.
Hi. Go ahead, Beth. Okay, sounds good. So, well, thank you for having us. Beth Christensen, Workforce Development. So, yeah, I agree. You know, the collaboration takes time, but Penny saves me so much time. One of the things that kind of came to mind as we were talking about this is just like the random challenges that come up, and when we discuss them, how just solutions come about. When the GED program switched over to the computerized testing, we really struggled internally with our financial system and the process it took for us to be able to get vouchers out. It was a struggle for my counselors and for our participants. And I had mentioned it in kind of in jest to Penny one day, and she fixed the whole thing for us. So she buys it and we reimburse them. So just all like the small random challenges that we have, we can fix together.
And from a ABE standpoint, Beth and I, you know, even how it is time consuming. We do a lot of emailing, but the ultimate goal is it definitely benefits the students. And we have just so many shared, I call them students, they probably call them clients, but we are just in constant contact. And really, they want what's best for their client. We want best for our students. So we really just try really hard to work and not duplicate services. And like Beth said, and then there are times like I provide transportation, but if Beth has the money to give the tokens, then WDI gives the tokens, so then I can give the tokens who aren't involved in different things. So yeah, for sure we'll avoid the duplication of services. And one of the things that Beth brought up as we were just sitting chatting too, we're not afraid to go back and say, hey, this isn't working. Or what can we do better? And neither one of us feel like, oh, you know, they're attacking me or whatever. It's just really great to know that we both just want what's best and we need to revise things. So even like for the P2P grant, the first year was a little bit more muddled, and after we had our first year, we all sat down and said, okay, what do we need to do better? And we were always modifying it. And it was just, Beth came up, she said, well, let's come up with a sheet that we can cross off so we know what everyone's doing. So, I mean, it's been really good. And how this all just started is when Beth became the new manager, I reached out and she reached out and we sat down and we chatted for about 25 minutes and just said, you know, it's nice to put a face to the name.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Great. So again, this is what we're doing. We're just having this sort of window onto various contexts. And again, especially for those of you who are really new to relating to the workforce, partners, not quite sure how to have that conversation, just hoping that you're hearing some examples. And again, I've got a roster of everybody who's speaking today, both in Schoology and in GoToMeeting. And any of these things you can follow up with folks. How did you really get that started? Whatever questions come up. I've asked Ann Kilzer to join us. Ann, thanks so much for being here. The cohort members met Ann at our August workshop. She's the director of the Minnesota Workforce Council Association. I just asked her to sort of connect the dots as she's listening to Judy's remarks from the federal level and the experiences from the field. She knows that every context is different. So Ann, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So yeah, I don't know that I have a lot more to add since I was at some prior meetings of this group and provided kind of a broader context there, but I think just hearing the success stories of areas where it's working well is probably the thing that folks can learn best from. And I don't think I've ever heard a story or a success story or a successful partnership where it didn't start out with, we didn't know each other, it was kind of difficult in the beginning, but kind of once we got up to speed and really kind of implemented a plan that had some sustainability to it, that things are better than they were before people were collaborating. So I think that's really the purpose of the new federal law under WIOA, having partnerships and having a combined state plan where everyone is kind of shooting in the same direction, as well as, you know, the whole federal priority on career pathways and looking at this as a system as opposed to separate programs that are working in silos are really important. I think that another thing that people have spoken about that's really important is the whole idea of focusing on where people can provide the most value and kind of collaborating so that we're sharing sharing participants or students and being able to use the resources that we have in the best way that we can. With federal resources being kind of uncertain, just with continuing resolutions that keep happening and the budget discussions that may or may not be beneficial to any of our programs, the more we can collaborate, the better it is if we don't have the resources that we need in every program to do everything, but also to be able to show that as we're implementing the new WIOA law that we're successful, gives us those success stories and that good return on investment gives us ammunition to continue to advocate for funding for our programs. Minnesota is really fortunate in that we have a lot of state resources that other states don't as well. So that allows us to do things and really be a model for other states. And I think that's important as well. Minnesota was kind of above or ahead of the curve on career pathways and some of the other things that were requested under WIOA, so that puts us in a good position to continue to be leaders, and it's these partnerships that really make that happen. I think in addition to career pathways in the Minnesota State Plan, there's a lot of focus around equity and inclusion and ensuring that, you know, our diverse populations are entering the workforce or training so that they have family sustaining wages and are able to support themselves and their families. And I think that, again, being able to utilize resources from all the different programs in a way that kind of can help surround a participant for any of the needs that they might have is really the goal of WIOA, and another reason that working together collaboratively is really important. With my role with the Workforce Council Association, we do have the 16 workforce development areas in Minnesota, but the Workforce Council Association is kind of a venue for all of us to be collaborating and talking across boundaries and regional boundaries and sharing best practices. So if there's a way that I can be a resource to folks as they're working with local partners or perhaps running into some stumbling blocks, being able to connect people to other areas where it might be working well, things like that, I'm more than happy to be a resource to folks. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd want me to cover at this point other than just reiterating I agree with everything that Judy said in regard to kind of what's happening at the federal level, and hearing the success stories of folks who are working well together, I think it is really important.
Thank you, Ann. No, that's perfect. And I would really encourage people to take Ann up on her offer. In many of our cohort calls, when Julie has been in on those calls, it would be similar to the kind of help that Ann could provide, just knowing people in the field, like, oh, Joe Olson, you know, and what his position is. And, you know, some of you, especially those of you who are new, just trying to figure out who is who, and if you're making a cold call, who should that be to, and all of that. Both Ann and Julie really are the go-tos. So thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you. Just a reminder that you can put questions into the chat box here. We've had a couple, and some of them actually already got answered in the chat box. Kathleen was asking about co-location, and Penny got back to us. So if you're not following the chat, you might want to expand that box just so you can see that sort of extra conversation that's happening in the chat box, and some of your questions may actually be answered. Just extending that invitation to chat any questions you have there to those speaking, either the workforce or the ABE partners. Todd, did you want to articulate your question again and see if anyone else, Karen responded, but perhaps others?
Sure. Actually, you may have noted that I asked a question just about whether or not that if any local workforce centers were using what I referred to as, quote, regular Title I money, and I guess what I meant by that was ongoing funding as opposed to grant funding like the P2P grant, for example, to purchase cohort training. As Judy had mentioned, that was a change that happened between WIA and WIOA, giving authority to workforce partners to use those ongoing funds to purchase the training component of an adult career pathway. And so I guess I was just curious the extent to which programs were maybe doing that. And you can see in the chat that Karen Walters answered my question just to say in Mankato, in fact, they're using a variety of sources other than Title II funds. So Title I adult, folk rehab, and other, plus in addition to P2P money, to cobble together funds to pay for training components. So I'd be curious to know if there are other cases people are aware of where that's happening. I think that's a huge opportunity that WIOA presents for putting together adult career pathway programming.
And Karen's asking you, Todd, are you referring to the entire cohort or individually we've been doing at the prior to the WIOA law?
So
yeah, I guess
following the individual.
Yeah, and so I guess Karen, it could be either. I actually was asking if a single chunk of money was buying a chunk of training for a cohort. I hadn't really thought of the possibility that you're referring to, where different chunks of money are being cobbled together. It seems to me either is a really good idea. You know, when we think about paying for adult career pathway programming, one of the key pieces is how do we pay for the actual occupational training? And of course, during the fast track years, one of the sources we looked to was that people would be enrolled in a post-secondary institution, and so it might be a Pell Grant that was paying for the actual occupational training, but it's the other funding available under WIOA from Title I programs, for example, is clearly available to do that as well. And in fact, one of the things we're reporting to the feds now as part of the new national reporting system is the amount of AFLA money, meaning adult basic ed money, that's actually being spent on training services, the occupational training component of IT, for example. And the emphasis is on having that amount be as small as possible as a way of reducing duplication of services, presumably meaning that Title I sources or Pell money or other sources like that are more appropriate for paying for the occupational training component.
Great, thank you. I also just want to remind people that this chat log, we will save it and Liz will post it to Schoology. So if there's valuable information there that you want to capture but you don't want to take the time to write it down right now, it will be captured another way electronically and posted in Schoology for you as well. So it looks like people are asking and answering each other's questions in the chat box. I don't think there's another one that I need to bring to the whole group unless one of my other organizers sees one. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and move on. Thank you for your questions. Keep them coming, and we'll have other points during the webinar where we'll pause to do that work.
Thank you. Really valuable exchange. We're going to move on now from sort of the big picture, federal, state, and just a little bit about, you know, how a couple of localities are seeing the why of the value of the collaboration and partnership to how do we establish, strengthen, and sustain these relationships. And thinking about that as perhaps a line, a nice straight upward arrow like I have, but I remember in a conversation I had with somebody, they said, yeah, it's probably more cyclical, because as soon as you establish, strengthen, and sustain, then some staffing changes, and you got to start from the beginning. So I'm going to curve that arrow around a bit in the next iteration of the illustration. Nonetheless, I think it is helpful because, again, we've got people in our Career Pathways cohort this year at each of these stages. And so I've asked people to just talk from their experience, how do you do this at each stage? So how do we enter into relationship with new workforce contexts? That's our first question, sort of the cold call or something better than a cold call. And I've asked Alison, based on some of what I've been watching her doing in her SMART goal and action steps, just to take a couple of minutes and shed some light on a couple of strategies that she has used that have been very effective. Thank you, Alison.
Hi. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I am fairly new to this area and kind of went in with kind of an idealistic nature to this whole process, but very excited to really make connections with the Workforce Center. The first thing that you can see here that we have on the slide here, that we have attended some events with the Workforce Center and one other place. So I'm going to go over these first and then kind of sum up what I've gotten out of those events. The first thing we attended was the healthcare panel, which was a panel of employers in healthcare. And my intention was to just go to the Workforce Center and listen in and just really understand more about the employers and also kind of the theme or the how the Workforce Center presents their services to job seekers. So I was there just to kind of understand what was going on there. And I did get a lot out of that by listening to the employers in healthcare. Also, that included like the Mayo Clinic as well, and I was able to make a connection there. The next thing we attended was the Healthcare Job Seekers Network event at the Workforce Center, and that was put on for job seekers. These were not our students, but they were the sort of the people in the community that are really connected with the Workforce Center. And this event really shed light on who their clients are and really kind of showed a little bit of a gap between the clients they're serving and then our students. They tend to have a focus on highly educated older workers, and it was really good to understand that typically they're used to working with those clients, so it was really good to attend that event so I can figure out how to bridge that gap with our students. At that event, I also marketed our phlebotomy class. It's a career pathway class. It's brand new. And we had more openings in that, so I was able to market that class in the Job Seekers Network meeting. Finally, we went to a regional healthcare summit up in St. Cloud, and that was very informative because we were able to understand the whole market of healthcare, the shortage of workers upcoming, some of the how programs and schools can work together so that we can train enough workers for this field, and also to network and figure out how to involve employers more in to connect with our training. So all of these.
Thank you.
Oh,
yep.
Sorry.
Just ask you to wrap up, Alison. Thank you.
Well, that's my problem.
Yep. Summary sentence.
Just to sum up, all of this led to a really great partnership meeting, which we are putting together a Google Doc. This is with our cohort, with Chelsea at Adult Options and ourselves and Workforce Center. So we have a whole Google Doc with a whole outline we're putting together on how we coordinate our services together. So basically, yeah, it's just seeking to understand and then putting in action steps. So that's
such a great way to step up, show up, listen. We have a lot to learn, and the conversations, the win-win conversations, are much stronger from that listening. So thank you so much, Alison.
Sure.
Also asked Hemi to share just a couple of very simple strategies that she has used over the years. Penny.
So can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, I mentioned this a little bit, but I just had Beth come over and took her tour of our site. It was very informal. It was just, hey, this is who I am, and Beth said, and then it kind of just, I think it was helpful for Beth to look at our site when you're referring people and different things. So yeah, I think the first time we met, it was like 30 minutes, and it was very casual, and it was just a really nice way for Beth and I to get to know each other, and it was just her and I, and it was really informal. And Beth is here too if she wants to say anything.
No, I think that's perfect. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just thought that was a great strategy, informal, quick, and how important it is for our partners to see our work in action. Chris also, as part of the cohort, had some great reflections on his first connection with some of his potential workforce partners in the Winona area. Chris.
Chris, you need to unmute on your end as well. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think I'm on now. I guess the big thing I'll say, based on, you can kind of read what's going on there on the slide. But our Workforce Center had been going through a lot of different staff changes and leadership changes, and probably for the previous year and a half to 2 years, once WIOA was kind of introduced to ABE, I had kind of been trying to email them and asking, hey, I think we're supposed to work together on some of this WIOA stuff, and I really never got anything solid, from anybody. And then I finally when I found out who the new director was, called him, said, hey, can I set up a meeting with you? I want to talk to you about a program that I'm starting. And then I gave him a little bit of information. He said, yes, let's set up a meeting. I'm going to have a bunch of other of my colleagues sit in on the meeting. And we sat down. I kind of told them what I was developing in the ACP program so far, what kind of things that they could possibly help with, and especially how their clients could benefit just the same as our students. And it was a great meeting. I think everybody left with a kind of a renewed passion for trying to accomplish our shared goals. But it took, I think, something specific on my part to get them to really hone in on what I was trying to get at. So I don't know if that's probably about all I would want to add to the information that you see.
I think that's a great reflection. We sort of laughed at hey, I think we're supposed to be working on this WIOA stuff. That doesn't necessarily get us very far. I appreciate sort of the honesty about that, but once you came with a vision and readiness to be a lead on an adult career pathway, that was something that they could imagine being in together. Exactly. Sort of a similar positive experience from Teresa and Nancy, and again, just asking them to share a couple of minutes about their initial contacts and how that has gone.
Hi, this is Nancy, and Teresa and I had both met Susan Boehm of the Workforce Development Inc. in the Southeast region and had just had moment conversations. Well, after our ACP cohort meeting, we were both like, we gotta call Susan. So we called Susan and said, would you like to meet? And she said, oh yeah. And she brought along Sonia and Orlando, and we brought Paul from DOC, who is our transition reentry person. And our first meeting was simply to say, what are you doing right now? And that opened up just wild ideas. We were all open to the conversation. You could see how we all were working to the same missions. It was just so much fun to have this energy at this very first meeting. Then we realized we needed to rein it in a little bit because we were looking statewide and other facilities, and we said, no, bring it in. We're going to stick with the Southeast region. We're going to look at just Faribault facility and creating a clear pathway from us through transition of the DOC into the Workforce Center. And it's just been wonderful. Our last meeting, we ended with 10 priorities that we want to work on.
Wow. So thank you, Nancy. So I'll let Teresa add here. So I think really the takeaway there is that starting point of what are you doing right now, and having that overlap of mission and priorities become apparent through that sharing.
That's right.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Teresa does not have audio. So thank you. There's much more to tell in that story. I know you had a big meeting yesterday, but that was just that bit that we wanted to share with folks. So thank you so much, Nancy. It's pretty exciting. 10 priorities. Sounds like you got your work cut out for you.
Thank you.
Julie is not able to be with us here today, but as we were talking about this, she said that one other possible approach to making and inviting in new workforce contacts, there's at least one region where the RTC convenes a transitions meeting where they invite the Workforce Center folks, and that can include discussion about adult career pathway initiatives. So just one other idea if that might be a fit in your region. And then I just had a couple of other quick comments here. What we heard all the way back from when we remember Karen Wolters and Diane Halverson talking about their collaborative work in Mankato, and I think we're really hearing it throughout today as well, that positive collaboration requires trust. Trust is built through ongoing relationships. And so really that idea that you're not just trying to do this compliance as institutions, but you're building relationships with individuals in those institutions. Yes, you need to understand the institutions and the roles and responsibilities of folks and their titles, but I also have had this practice over the years that I really like to promote, which is go beyond the institutional and just ask, well, and who are you? And why are you doing this work in this place? What's great? What's tough? And have that conversation, and sometimes that can take 5 to 7 minutes, and all of a sudden you are at a different place in a relationship. Doesn't have to be, I mean, it's still professional conversation, but you'll get a lot of insights, and I think can build trust more quickly if you choose to have some of that real connecting conversation with one another. Another thing to think about. Moving on then, the next question, so that was really that idea of just establishing new relationships and lots of different ideas about how we can go about that. The next question is, how do we structure ourselves for effective collaborative work around a particular adult career pathway? And we've got the Mankato and the Duluth context, and hoping again that there is there's some takeaways here that might be helpful in for other cohort participants. Karen.
Hi, Karen Walters from Mankato Adult Basic Education. So I have been serving on the local Workforce Development Board for 3 years, starting my 4th year of my 2nd term. And at the same time that our local Workforce Development Board has been existing, we've also had what's called a Fast Track Adult Career Pathway Committee in our community existing. And in the last couple of years, our Workforce Council head, Diane Halverson, decided to make our Adult Career Pathways Committee a subcommittee of the local Workforce Development Board. So that happened, I believe, about 2 years ago. She called me and she said that she had made this decision. I don't know if that was her idea or something that the state had decided. And what did I think about that? And we talked about it, and I volunteered to chair that committee simply because I had been working with Fast Track for a number of years as an implementer in a previous role, and felt like I knew she needed someone to step up who was serving on the board to chair that committee and to bring the messages back to the board. So we took that to the committee. I volunteered, and people really didn't want to chair it, so it worked out really well. So now we have an official subcommittee of the Workforce Development Board called Adult Career Pathways. And first of all, who's on that committee? We expanded it at that point. We have several community-based organizations, people from all of our workforce titles, 1, 2, 3, and 4. In fact, we have 4 regional ABE consortia there. Our Workforce Council, our Perkins Coordinator, industry partners, our local school district. So we have a lot of leadership on that committee. Our role, or what we do, or how we operate, is we meet quarterly. And we really have worked to become partners, and this is really Liz's words, not my words, but we have become partners in conceiving, designing, and delivering the ACP programming for our region. So we all are shared leaders in that. We work together. Nobody is the ACP director. There's no one person in charge of it. We all work together and make decisions through that committee, and we write grants through that committee, dedicate resources, make commitments through that committee. And we also have smaller groups meeting, more like task committees that meet as needed for implementation and marketing. And those are committees that kind of are more like at the implementation level. So one thing that I think is important, we've talked about this before, but to summarize kind of what I've said and to just reinforce what people have already said, Diane Halverson gave us a quote a long time ago that I think is really important to think about. And it's, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And I think that's very true, that many times we want to get things going, and so we go fast and we just kind of go by ourselves, but it can quickly burn out if you don't involve the partners and work as a team to design and deliver the ACP programming. So that's really what the value of that committee is.
Thank you so much, Karen. Duluth has something similar. They have a Career Pathways Committee as part of, or under their local workforce development board, and then under that they create subcommittees for the design and delivery of a specific adult career pathway program. If you remember a previous slide, they've got a healthcare adult career pathway subcommittee, they've got one for hospitality. And so one thought I'd had is, if you don't have that, and again, I don't presume what's possible in context, but you could explore over the coming year the possibility of some kind of structure like that within your local workforce development board. And certainly I would imagine that Diane Halverson and Paula Reed would be happy to be resources for folks on the local workforce development board who want to consider that kind of an approach for effective collaboration and the structure around that. Thank you so much. Next, we're thinking about how to ensure effective coordination around implementation of a particular adult career pathway program. And again, we've asked Penny and Beth to just talk briefly again about what's happening in Albert Lea, and just getting really specific about how we do the work.
Yep. So with our most recent ACP program, it was actually Austin, Albert Lea, and Owatonna, and it works well because not only is it the cohort region, but it also is all served by Workforce Development Incorporated. So it's the same cohort of ABE providers, but it's also the same organization providing the workforce services. So that's really been a blessing to us. We hold regular meetings. I mean, we do a lot, probably weekly email conversations, but then regular meetings throughout the duration of our programs, and then, you know, we'll ramp up again as we get ready for the next round. Go ahead.
And I think obviously Liz did that. We never, I don't think either one of us feel we're in competition. I mean, we collaborate on a lot of things. It's just, I just think the thing that we all need to remember is this is really all about the people we're serving and not each other. So, and I think Beth and I both agree that that's kind of, that's where we always go back to, how is this helping our students we're serving? And again, it went back to, you know, after we did it once and now we are doing it again, Beth, you know, like I said previously, the to-do list. And again, we're not afraid to say, hey, I don't, you know, let's talk about this. I don't, you know, let's expand. How is this going to work? So again, I just really like how it's about collaboration.
I think something else that's really beneficial is we're fluid between the two locations. So Penny will come over to Workforce. I mean, we're not that far apart. She'll come over the mile to Workforce for a meeting, and then my counselors will come over here to meet with our participants. So instead of the participants having to hop on the bus to head back over to Workforce, you know, the counselors just come here to meet with them whenever they can.
Thank you so much. And again, lots more that we could learn from exactly how all of that has been put together over a number of years, but that's a great glimpse into some of that work. We've also invited Molly Liberto, an ABE colleague, to be here with her workforce counterpart, Janine Christensen, and they have a unique setup there. And what I took away from Molly was particularly what happens when she's in that workforce center. I know that's not an option for everybody, but just a little bit about maybe some more casual and creative ways to connect between ABE and workforce. Molly and Janine.
Hi, this is Janine Christensen, Program Coordinator with Job Training Center, and we've just had a very long-term successful relationship with ABE for many, many years. And the Job Training Center is co-located with Metro North ABE and the Blaine Human Service Center, along with many other Workforce Center partners in a one-stop service model. So being co-located really strengthens our communication, our referral process, and streamlines services. And we also have ongoing partner meetings to share ideas and improve processes for career pathways. So really, we find that the successful career pathway endeavor really includes a lot of strong collaboration and partnership. They're providing, ABE obviously provides the bridge component of our integrated education and training, really focusing on building the fundamental skills in reading and math for students by offering that contextualized instruction for the 3 different pathway trainings that we offer. We also use a universal application for individuals who are interested in any of our programs and services, which can be completed in person or online. So after signing a release of information, we share that data with ABE for those individuals who are enrolled in career pathway trainings to avoid any duplication of service. And then we also have a universal orientation after eligibility is determined, where individuals can come and learn about Workforce Center programs and services for adults and youth, about getting their GED, college prep, post-secondary training, career pathway training, looking for work, workshops, and so on and so forth. And individuals are given a full TABE to assess reading and math scores, and then have an opportunity to meet one-on-one with a vocational counselor or a career navigator for our career pathway training for further assessment. And we also, for those who have self-disclosed having a disability, individuals can also meet with a disability resource coordinator to offer additional support, advocacy, accommodations. And we have partnered with ABE in doing that, making modifications and accommodations around TABE testing. So there's an example where we've used that as well.
Hi, this is Molly Liberto. So I'm with Metro North ABE. In addition to the universal application that Janine spoke about, we also use a universal learning center referral. The referral form is the first line of communication between the Workforce Center counselors and the ABE staff in regards to potential ABE learners. It's used for all of our programs located within Anoka County, ESL, ABE, short-term training. The referral process really is helpful because it provides important information on our new potential learners, including the name of the counselor they're working with, the class or program they're interested in, their TABE locator scores, and a signed release of information. So having this type of form really enables ABE staff, Workforce Center staff, and learners to work together from the very beginning. As Judy mentioned, we are co-located together in my program here in Blaine with the Anoka County Workforce Center. And we do have that strong history of working together. And through that strong history, we've had amazing opportunities to really help further our missions. Because of our partnership, we've had the ability to cross-train each other. Examples of this would be ABE has done TABE assessment training for Workforce Center staff. ABE staff has joined their monthly meetings when needed to share about information, any big changes happening in the world of ABE, or any new programming opportunities. And on the flip side, Workforce Center staff have presented numerous times at our local ABE staff development events. And over the years, we have had the ability to collaborate on a number of small-scale, short-term training programs that really target MPhib clients. These programs are developed to help individuals who may not qualify for traditional career pathway training due to lower reading scores or perhaps the inability to commit to a longer time frame. Examples would be anything from teaching a class and helping proctor, like for the NRF, that National Retail Federation, customer service exam, or ServSafe. We've done a 12-week GED program that was really customized that included job search and career exploration that was taught by the Workforce Center staff for those potential pathways programming participants who were perhaps a little too low or needed their GED at the time before they could enter the program. We've also developed a 48-hour bridge component for our lower level learners, focusing on increasing their reading skills and medical terminology knowledge to help them transition to a CNA program at the local college.
Thank you, Molly.
Yep.
So we're going to move on. What's so interesting as I listen to what you're both saying, Molly and Janine, is that all of the things you described, they don't really require co-location. They require a relationship. The relationship is easier, truly, if you're in the same building. But I'm hoping that other people heard some pretty interesting opportunities there. Cross-training, tape training, being at monthly meetings on a quarterly basis to give updates, etc. Excellent. Thank you so much. When we think about these collaborations, and as Judy said, ultimately partnerships, we also need to think about how we move from one-time project coordination to longer-term adult career pathway planning and visioning together. I know several of you at the cohort workshop in August talked about, well, we had this thing going, it was a grant, we did it, and there really wasn't anything sustained beyond the grant project. And I thought it was really interesting to invite Anne to speak. It's really in process, and so it's not so much a success story as a step forward through her cohort, related to her cohort SMART goal. So Anne, if you would just share briefly sort of how you're trying to make this move to the bigger picture work.
Hello everyone, this is Anne Triple with Glacial Lakes ABE, and what I recognized about the relationship that we have with our workforce partner is that when I began my work with ABE, we were in the middle of a Pathways to Prosperity adult career pathway program in healthcare. And so I never really knew that it was possible to work without them, because that's just what it's been the whole time that I've been employed. But what happens when we talk about future, well, we don't really talk a lot about future adult career pathway programs until we're about 2 weeks to a month out from a grant opportunity. And then I get a phone call or I get an email, we're thinking about doing this, this is some of the objectives of it, what's your input? And it's just very fast and quick, and it doesn't feel like we have a lot of time to really think or compare notes about what we're hearing from our partners across the state, examples of different kinds of programming that's out there. So for my SMART goal, and as a result of this adult cohort that we're in, adult career pathway cohort, I have written a goal to connect with the adult and dislocated worker program coordinator and ask her if she might be willing to meet with me just for the purpose of planning and collaboration outside of specific grant timelines. And I'm happy to report that she agreed and is looking forward to those meetings. She couldn't join us today for this webinar, but I'm super excited that she saw the value and sees the value in the fact that we could sit down together and maybe prepare some new things long before the grant opportunity comes along, and kind of envision what are the ways that we could be successful with recruitment and meeting our participants' needs. So.
Thank you. Just think that's very valuable step forward. And, you know, I appreciate that you said, well, I don't know what you're going to think. I don't know if they'll see the value. And clearly, it makes sense to folks. And again, you know, it can feel like one more meeting, except to shift from that reactive to proactive approach makes just so much sense. Thank you, Anne, for sharing that, and we'll be eager to hear by the end of the cohort year how that has gone. Again, chat questions as you're going along. Make notes about things that you're hearing about that you're wondering if I could track down afterwards and put into Schoology. For example, I thought that universal referral form would be helpful to see. Again, it has to be different in each context. And not seeing any questions, we are going to move on at this point. Effective strategies for joint recruitment of adult career pathway participants is our last focus. And again, most of you, I imagine, are up to speed on this, but just wanted to make sure that we move into this part of the conversation with clarity from Todd about the types of participants that we're talking about in the Workforce Center context.
Thanks, Liz. So Anne or Judy or Karen or anyone else with insights in this, please jump in as well. But I had just mentioned something in an earlier meeting that Liz wanted me to just add to and clarify, just making this distinction between that there are career and training services offered through the workforce centers in Minnesota, and there are employment services. And the distinction there really is that the career and training services, when you hear those terms, it's really referring primarily to Title I programs. And when you hear employment services, it's referring to the Title III or Wagner-Peiser programming. And that Wagner-Peiser programming is really the job search. You know, it might be the resource room that has computers available for people to come in and do job search. And those folks, those people who are receiving employment services, are the folks that you'll hear people refer to as universal customers. And while certainly well worth exploring relationships with both program areas, it's more likely, and if you look in the chat, Judy chatted a very long list of possible funding sources for the training component of an adult career pathway. The Wagner-Peiser money, Title III, is really not a source of funding for that component, but you might coordinate services of other kinds with the, you know, just sort of job search resources, et cetera, with the Wagner-Peiser folks.
Okay, thank you so much. We've got a couple of different programs who are doing sort of various approaches to recruitment and cross-referral. We're going to begin with Brent. We'll have Brent on first. Karen, you're muted, and then we'll switch and unmute you. Brent, you had shared with me just some of the approaches that you take to reaching workforce staff, who in turn can identify and refer folks to your adult career pathway programs as well as other ABE services, and just wanted you to talk about some of your strategies. Brent, we're not hearing you.
There, now I'm unmuted. It just said unmuted.
Thank you.
Yay. All right. So,
and we're running just a little bit behind. Yeah, Brent, we're just running a little behind.
Kind of a shotgun approach. I don't have a good organization chart in my head for Workforce Solutions, so I kind of a month or two before I start signing people up for the next cohort, I fire an email off to about as many names as I can think of, and I always make sure Karen Berg is at the top of that list, saying I'd like to get in on your next staff meeting and come and present and talk about career pathway opportunities that we're offering. And I like to make sure I share some success stories of past students that have been referred by Workforce Solutions or other programs. And it always helps when there's somebody in the room who says, oh yes, I sent so-and-so there and now they're making $45,000 a year.
Great. So I think just that, I think one of the takeaways for me from Brent is when that organizational chart, as he called it, is so complicated for us to get our heads around, he's just decided, well, I don't really need to understand the whole structure, especially when there are staffing changes and all of that, but I need relationships with the managers and key counselors that are sending folks to our adult career pathways and work through them to ensure that I'm in front of folks. And the other thing is, I discovered this also with our Workforce Center when I was at Hubs, you just have to keep showing up and telling the stories of impact, as well as really being clear about who the programs are for. So thought it was interesting also to hear from Karen, who is in one of the workforce centers that Brent relates to. And Karen, any other thoughts from you on sort of the sharing of information across workforce, ABE, referral systems, et cetera.
And Karen, you need to enter your audio PIN to be unmuted. And that's been sent to you through the...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Great. Thank you.
Well, the two things that we've been coming up with and working on lately are, one, a documented referral system.
Excuse me, sorry. We're actually looking for Karen Berg. We have one other person who has worked with Brent Olinger. Karen Walters, I'm just going to have you hold off for just 1 second. Karen Berg, we're looking for you to enter a PIN in order to be queued up with audio from your end. If you're not able to do that, we'll ask you just to chat some comments into the chat box. Okay, I think we will move on, and we've got Karen Walters and Sarah Kerrigan from Mankato. We heard from Karen earlier, but this one is specifically related to Karen's SMART goal in the cohort around cross-referral systems. And I thought that would also be of interest to many of you in the cohort. Karen Walters, thank you. And Sarah Kerrigan, welcome.
Thank you, Liz. So one of the things that has happened in Mankato is years back, we probably have had a working relationship with the Workforce Center for at least 8 to 10 years. But we used to do just, thinking about that continuum you talked about, Liz, just like verbal referrals, handing out our cards to clients, telling them about different programs that could be accessed. And then when we had North Star digital literacy classes, we started doing written referrals because we needed to count people under transitions to employment to get our 30 hours. And we've had lots of changes in staff here at ABE and in different programs. And we've decided to go back to a written referral system, and for everyone, so not just ACP programming, but for anyone, and really wanted it to be a two-way referral system. So we've revised our referral form to be a two-way referral, which has listed the workforce programs and the ABE possibilities on it. And it contains a lot of the same things that we mentioned earlier: a release of information, TABE scores, if necessary, which program we're trying to refer to, the person's name, the counselor's name. But we're really working to try to document our referrals and work together as a system to figure out how many referrals are we making and how is that working, so that we can work to improve it. And I really don't think there's any way to do that unless we document the referrals and find out where they're coming from and where they're going to. So that took working with the workforce manager and us setting a common goal together for this year, and then getting all of our staff on board. One way that we want to get our staff on board, over the last couple of years, we've had some grants that have allowed us to do some sessions with our staff, kind of like 101 sessions: Workforce Center 101, ABE 101, MVAC 101, Library 101. And we've been able to get even the college to invite staff to come to each other's systems and learn about them, come to each other's buildings and learn about what they offer and how to make a referral and what an appropriate referral would look like. So through these meetings we've had, we've decided that we need to do that more, and we need to do it more intentionally, probably in the form of a workshop in the spring and in the fall, so that we can really get our admissions staff, our frontline staff at the Workforce Center, and our frontline staff at the ABE site all on board to learn what the resources are and how to make referrals. So we're going to be working on that in the future, probably this year yet. And then Sarah wants to.
This is Sarah Kerrigan, and I'm just going to talk about how being on site at our different areas is very helpful. I'm located at a Workforce Center, and I work for DEED. But at main areas that we have recruitment, like adult basic education, there's somebody at the front desk that knows enough about our ACP programs to kind of get individuals started. We have an AB integrated instructor at the college that's there
most days of the week that if somebody comes to the college and asks a question, they can be referred to him. And then I'm at the Workforce Center, so I represent, like if we have a walk-in universal client that's asking about nursing assistant courses, or even somebody that's working with VRS or any of the other WIOA titles, they can ask me if they have any questions. Sometimes I'll go in their office. What I have noticed is since a lot of the counselors now at the Workforce Center are familiar with Fast Track, I don't get pulled as much to answer questions unless it's just a walk-in individual that doesn't know anything about our Fast Track program. Sometimes I'll have counselors that kind of ask me questions on the side. So I think that's really helpful just to have that face to the program in all those different locations. And also then staff at the Workforce Center kind of know who I am. If they do have questions like, is this a good referral or is this a good fit for this person, they can ask me in passing. A couple other things that are kind of helpful is because I wear different hats at the Workforce Center. I do some of the Wagner-Pizer workshops once in a while. I also work with the Title I programs, Adult and Dislocated Worker. In a previous position, I worked with our the WIOA youth program many years ago. So I know a lot of the other counselors that do those roles as well. So I kind of have that understanding of both programs and our ultimate outcomes. So another thing in our area that's kind of different is we do have our Workforce Council that oversees our program. When we do have our fast track programs running for our bridges, we have the Workforce Council send out a mass mailing email to our Workforce Center partners. I think there's like 60 to 80 workforce counselors in the area that goes out to. So they have our flyers. 150, Karen's telling me, 150 counselors in the area. So that's helpful. And ABE is also invited to our twice a year, our Workforce Center system in this area will have training days. And so we'll invite the ABE staff to those as well so we can kind of get to know each other. So.
Thank you to both of you. Again, it just seems like lots of different communication tools and strategies there that have been built up over the years. I am aware from a couple of the cohort calls that this works well when you have an ABE program and a single workforce center in relationship to one another in a small to medium-sized context, and it's a very, very different story within the metro area for all sorts of reasons. And I just want to acknowledge that. You've got workforce centers with multiple ABE programs in their service areas, and you've got ABE programs with multiple workforce centers in their service areas, and this can't happen in the same way. I still am going to be curious about what opportunities there are, because we have to be at least showing up and doing the communication level of connection, and once that's happening over time, some of those deeper and broader relationships, I think, can be developed. We'd like to use our last 5 minutes. Patsy is just going to moderate a bit of discussion.
So just an invitation, of course, to use the chat box and also to raise your hand if you want to use the little raise your hand feature, and we can call on you. And Astrid and I will be taking a look and being sure that we draw our attention to anyone who has their hand raised. A couple of things in the chat box. Karen Berg, I'm sorry we weren't able to get your audio to work earlier, but she writes that Brent was right, the relationships are important. Frequent communication about programs for cross-referral and success stories helps to strengthen those relationships. Even some individual consulting around customers' needs and problem solving for special situations. So thank you for that, Karen. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you earlier. And then Laura writes, we need more to share more success stories, not only for programs, but also for the community to hear. So another excellent point. Other questions that are coming up for you or things that you would like to talk about? I'm taking a look, seeing if there are any hands raised. You can share your own experience. Right, or if there's something from your own experience that you'd like to share regarding some of the topics that have come up on this webinar, now's the time. Laura continues, would like some more information about ACP navigation approach, roles and responsibilities. Great, we'll make a note of that. Thank you. Other questions or comments before we close? We realize there's been a lot shared, a lot to take in, and again, a reminder that this chat log will be archived, and we'll save that for you in a readable format in Schoology and posted. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Liz unless there are other questions.
Thank you for your attention and active engagement, passive engagement, I guess. Thank you. I trust that there's been lots learned today. Again, the idea of concrete strategies and what can you apply in your context to strengthen your own adult career pathway programming. A big thank you to all of the presenters today. Cohort participants, note that webinar evaluation, we really do need your input. As you know, and as you entered this cohort, you know that we're in a pilot year. Very eager for all positive and critical feedback on how we use these webinars and various other ways to share out strategies and tools. It should pop up when you sign out today, and there also will be a link in a follow-up email. You'll need to click on the instructions in that evaluation in order to know how to use the scale, the 1 to 5. I don't know why they hide the instructions, but you just need to click on that so you know how to answer the scale score items. And guests, you're also welcome to provide comments on any of those questions if you would like to give us feedback for today, or if you want to do any other follow-up with us. Again, we'll post the webinar recording and the complete chat log in Schoology once those are available. And just to be sure that you also look into the Schoology reference folders, there's a Workforce Center partnership folder, and I do have in there now a flow chart from Mankato that Karen Walters shared on sort of how their collaboration does the work in adult career pathway implementation. She's also shared their joint referral form. And again, those are going to be specific to a particular context, but how great to be able to start with a draft from somebody else that might prove to be a useful template. And there are 10 or 12 other items in that Workforce Center Partnerships folder that are intended to be tools for you in your work. I will open a Schoology discussion to follow on from today's webinar. And we wish you good luck in your ongoing adult career pathway efforts.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to thank Liz for all of her efforts. This was a lot of coordinating, as you can imagine, to have all of our guest speakers join us and to coordinate the schedule for the webinar and ending exactly on time. Impressive. So thank you so much, Liz, for all of your help, and thanks to all of the guest speakers on today's webinar. I appreciate it very much. We'll stay on for a few moments if people have additional things they want to bring up. Otherwise, we will be in touch. Thank you.